Shabbat Shalom. So I have a question for you. If somebody promises you that they're going to give you a present, for example, we have Hanukkah coming up in just a few weeks, and somebody says, I would like to buy you a certain gift in honor of Hanukkah, or a birthday present, or whatever it should be. Does that gift become yours just by them promising to you, or do they have to actually give it to you? What happens if they give it to you or just in the room, it's on the table, but you didn't take it yet? Does it become yours yet, or do you have to actually acquire it yet? This is a very big question, we know, because for example, in Israel, we have this question today: is the area of Yehuda and Shomron, Judah and Samaria, or they call it the West Bank, is it Israel's yet, or does Israel have to actually annex that area? How does it become yours? And in this week's Torah portion, we have an interesting conversation about this, because what happens is the Torah tells us that God wants Isaac not to leave the Holy Land of Israel. And it's an interesting question: why should he not leave the land of Israel? And the answer is because it's a holy land. And Isaac became a holy person, a really holy person, became like a sacrifice. Why? We know the famous story. Abraham brought him up top of Mount Moriah, and he was ready to sacrifice him as a offering for God. And although, of course, we know the famous story, Isaac survives that episode and he does not sacrifice, but because he was put on the altar as a sacrifice, he has the qualities of a sacrifice, and therefore he becomes holy, and he's holy, and the land of Israel is holy, and therefore he cannot leave the land of Israel. But here's the interesting question. God promised Abraham that he's going to give him the land of Israel to him and his offspring, etc., etc., but can Abraham actually acquire the land of Israel at this point? He's just one man, and he only has one child, Isaac. The Jewish people are not going to get it. The land of Israel is not going to come to Jews until many, many years later, until the Jews go to Egypt, and they leave Egypt, and they go to the desert, and only later when Joshua brings the Jews in, they fight for 7 years, and they settle the land of Israel for another 7 years, 14 years of conquering and settling. Then Israel becomes theirs. So why can't Isaac leave the land of Israel? So actually there's two different opinions. One opinion is brought down the Medrash and says that God doesn't say, I'm going to give the land of Israel to you. He says, I give you the land of Israel in the present tense, meaning to say, he doesn't say attain using the Hebrew words. He uses the word natati, I gave you, in the past tense, meaning to say that the land of Israel is already given to you now. Abraham doesn't have to do anything about this. And there's a lot of commentary that talks about if that's the case, why does Abraham have to purchase land, Hebron, the tomb of the patriarchs, and so on and so forth. That's a whole other discussion I don't want to get into now. But here's the interesting thing. The Medrash tells us that Israel is already holy at this point. And that's why he cannot leave the land of Israel. Fine. That means to say if somebody gives you a gift, or they promise you a gift, it's as if it's already yours. Rashi takes a very different explanation. And Rashi says, the reason why he cannot leave Israel is because outside of Israel is so unholy, so unspiritual, that's going to have a negative effect on Isaac. Isaac is a holy guy because of the reasons I just mentioned. But because of that reason, and because outside of Israel is so unholy, therefore he cannot leave Israel. So here we have two very opposite explanations. One is because Israel is holy and he cannot leave Israel. The other explanation is because outside of Israel is so unholy, and we don't want Isaac to be influenced by the outside unholiness. And I find this to be very, very interesting. First of all, we find that the Medrash, which generally speaking gives us homiletical explanations, we're not so worried about the technical halachic basic explanation of what the verses are trying to tell us, versus Rashi, who tries to come with a practical, clear explanation of the verses. So we're coming to two different approaches on how to understand what the verses are telling us. But I think the lesson is, for us, practical on both sides. Number one is we have to go more spiritual, homiletical, and understand the deeper meaning. From a halachic, legal perspective, you're right. Israel might not be holy, it might not be in our hands. You might actually have to acquire and lift the item up to say it's yours. So somebody promises you a gift for Hanukkah, you might say it's not technically yours until you acquire it. Okay, fine. You got me on the technical, legal terms. Okay. But spiritually speaking, Israel is ours. You do have to annex it, you don't have to annex it, that's a whole nother discussion. I'm leaving up that to the politicians. But from a spiritual perspective, of course it's ours. Of course, God's promise to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, of course that's real. Of course, when somebody tells you they're going to give you a gift, they have to keep their word. But there's a deeper message over here, and this is what Rashi is trying to teach us. We have to know our place. We have to know our mission in life. Abraham went to Israel. He left Israel. Isaac cannot. Jacob leaves Israel. He goes to Egypt. He settles in Egypt for many years. And of course, we know the tribes went to Egypt. You see, every single person has a different mission in life. Some people are meant to stay in Israel. Some people come and go. Some people never go to Israel. Today, obviously, we have the freedom to go, which is beautiful. Each and every person has their goal in life. The trick is for us to figure out what that is. Abraham had his mission of spreading Judaism wherever he could go. Isaac was stayed at home, but he had a very, very hard job. His job was to dig deep down within his own resources. The expression is he dug wells. In other words, he had to go deep down, work really, really hard, and find within his own self, within the deep down, in other words, within the earth, and uncover the hidden well springs and reveal what's there and find godness over there. Jacob was different. Jacob was a shepherd, just like his grandfather Abraham. And that is to pasture the fields, find the grass, find the sheep, and uncover and elevate, what we would say, the animals of this world, right? Change the environments around. And Jacob actually lived in his father-in-law's house, a terrible guy, right? But that was his job, to find spirituality there. And it says, the expression on Jacob is that even while he lived in such unholy environments, he was able to elevate that world as well. Isaac couldn't live in that environment. It will be too unholy for him, and it will have a bad influence on him. So we see different kind of people have different kind of experiences. And that's what Torah is trying to teach us. One person is like this, and there's another person like that, and we can't judge each other. Everybody has their own experiences. And I'll just leave you with this thought. We're just a few weeks away from Hanukkah. Every single person has other kind of experiences, and we don't know what each person is like, but we are educators. We are parents. We are here to teach other people. Comes time, we could buy a gift for our child, right? But we could also maybe give them money to buy that gift. If we give our child money to buy that same gift that they're going to buy, we also have a chance to educate them and teach them a very important message, a very important lesson. That is as follows. Let's say you're going to buy a child a gift that's worth $50, let's just say. What happens if you give your child and say, you want to buy this gift for $50, and you say, here is $55, and now you have $5 extra to give to charity. The kid's going to get the same exact gift, but now you also taught them a lesson of how to help another person, how to give charity. I think this is a lesson of what we could do. Each of us has a mission in life. We might not know what that is when we're young. As we grow older, we figure that out. Are we an Isaac? Are we a Jacob? Are we supposed to be digging wells and uncovering hidden resources? Or are we supposed to try to elevate our surrounding areas? Do we live in Israel? Do we live outside of Israel? We don't know. But we do know that we can educate those around us and try to change this world and make it into a better place. Shabbat Shalom.